Hi there. Mr. Matt Easton of Skull Gladiatoria made a very good video the other day about the effects of winter clothing or multiple layers of clothing and cutting and versus cutting and thrusting weapons. And it was really interesting, and it kind of brought up thoughts I have myself had and things I've talked about in seminars and training and stuff that really has shaped my training over the years. And he took it up, and I'm going to follow up on that thread kind of, because he spoke about the effects that historical weapons and the development of weapons, the effects of clothing have had on the development of weapons, or at least the possible effect it has had. And the main point he made is that cutting weapons is less effective against multiple layers of clothing, like for example wool or things like this, and then thrusting weapons are. And this brings me to a more contemporary topic, which is today, even though maybe we don't wear layers upon layers upon layers of wool in Scandinavia where I live, but still we wear thick winter jackets and sometimes maybe a few layers of wool in winter time, and at least about 6 months of the year I'm wearing pretty thick clothing. And this is why I've been saying that, okay, when I teach knife, I say cutting is less important than thrusting. I don't say don't cut, because I do, but thrusting is our main attack form, because cutting is simply just less effective against thick clothing. And this has several effects. That this means, for example, that the classic it's called defanging the snake, where you basically cut on the inside of the arm on your way in, for example. Stuff like this, it has a tendency to not work. Because just put on a thick winter jacket and you're basically immune to, unless you really, I mean a really big knife, but maybe kind of sword or machete, then you might cut through it, but at least there's no guarantee. And that means that a lot of these techniques, they're just defunctional. And a lot of this is in part a problem for us in the Southeast Asian martial art community, where we have brought several Southeast Asian martial arts to Europe, and the empty hand versions I think are completely unproblematic in most cases, but there are some exceptions. But at the moment you start bringing in weapons and you see how they are used, you see a lot of the systems, they are very cutt-centric. They work on the cuts. And the thing is that if you start cutting somebody, of course exposed areas will still be exposed areas, but I mean, at least when I'm going out in the winter, I will have a thick winter jacket covering me about from here to down here. That means most of the sweet spots, except my face and my hands, are kind of pretty much covered. I mean, you could get up into my groin if you really wanted to, but that limits the amount of places you could really cut to get a good effect. And this is why I'm saying that, you see, if you see circular cutting moves, that this is predominantly what a system is doing, and you are training in your living, and you're training for some sort of realism or self-defense or whatever, or you just want your system to work, to have a realistic quality in it, and you live in somewhere like Northern Europe or Northern United States or Canada, or I mean somewhere where you can't wear a sarong and a t-shirt and all year and be happy. You are in you maybe have to at least adapt what you're doing, because these cutting moves, they will probably not have the desired effect. And this is why I cut on my way in, but when we do it, we cut with so much force that it also serves as a strike, and I really work on getting the weapon offline, and the immediate response is to thrust, rather than to continue cutting. So if you see somebody, especially blade up, cutting, because if blade down, then you're actually stabbing, and that's a completely different thing. But if you have the blade up and you're cutting like this, then that will, most of the time, unless you're really good at pinpointing targets, which I'll just say is harder than not having to do it, then maybe the system that you have imported for self-defense purposes might not really work as well. So maybe you have to change it a bit. This is at least the thoughts that I've had, and it reminded me. This video reminded me of this. I'll link the video below because it's good, and he brings up several historical connections to this about people actually not managing to, in war, actually not managing to penetrate woolen clothing with swords. And this is historical accounts of British soldiers, writing home, complaining that their sabers couldn't cut through Russian winter coats. So this isn't a made-up scenario. These are real accounts of real soldiers. So we know this to be true, and it's something that we kind of forget. And I think the reason we forget it is that we mostly train in a dojo or gelangang, or what do you want to call it. But we train indoors, in comfortable, you're in t-shirt, everything is nice, and you don't get to experience those things. Actually, in my group, we have a lot of the time trained outdoors, in part because of this, and also in part for economical purposes. But also, and this brings me to my next point, and that is that outdoor training has another good feature, and it's that footing is not always secure. So a lot of the footwork that you can see in Southeast Asian martial arts are adapted to the environment that these martial arts developed in. Now, for example, if your system is very acrobatic and lots of jumping and going down low and high up, and you're fighting and you're training for some self-defense related purpose, and you are living in a place where the ground is full of ice and snow half the year, or at least a large portion of the year, then it means that maybe your system, the system you're training, will be a bit ineffective a large part of the year, or at least you have to adapt it to this. And I don't mean that to say that these systems are not worthwhile and are completely waste of time. That's not my message, please. I love some of these systems. I think they're fantastic, but I think some of them have applications that are less useful in their pure form. You can adapt them, and then it can work, but that actually demands that time from you. A lot of the footwork and the jumping and the weird, little going down, almost spinning around on the ground. This stuff, it's not very easy to do if the ground is like, and we're not talking about, an ice skating ring. We're talking about, ground which is uneven but slippery, and all these things. You have to take these things into account if you're training for self-defense. If you're just training because you love the art, then ignore what I'm saying and just continue what you're doing. And I absolutely don't think that that's any less worthwhile than any other purpose. But if your goal is to have some sort of realism, I suggest that you maybe during the winter time with some clothing on, try your training and do some of your training outdoors and see what happens, and think about what would be the effects of this if the guy had a lot of clothes on. And of course there's other things that will play in here also in the empty hand part. For example, if you have a lot of thick clothing, like a really thick winter jacket, some of the gunting stuff and the limb destruction, it might not, I mean, it will still hurt, but it will have slightly less of an effect than it would if you're wearing a t-shirt, obviously. So these are things that we that are practicing Southeast Asian martial arts with some sort of self-defense intent and living in Northern Europe and Northern United States or Canada or wherever with similar climate should think about, because we might have to adapt our techniques a bit. Maybe some of you are already doing this. I am, but I mean, I'm assuming I'm not going to be the only one. And if you do, please tell me how you're doing it. Share with me and everybody else who's watching this video. All right, thank you. Bye bye.